From TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jason Kitamura, and this is Tech in Cannabis, where I talk with game changers in the tech community to gain valuable insights into the future of the fast-paced cannabis industry. Today, we are joined by Chris Boudreau with RipeMetrics. Just a little over 10 years ago, Chris was a commercial banker, and since then has founded Calyx Distribution, driven deliveries, opened multiple dispensaries, and consults for various cannabis companies. Now he is focused on improving the cannabis customer experience with marketing algorithms based on the psychological analysis of their patterns and behaviors. We discuss how RipeMetrics is poised to change the industry, along with how he got here in his career and what the outlook is on cannabis. All right, today we are joined by Chris Boudreau. Hey, Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So if for all you out there, if you don't know who Chris Boudreau is, he has a very extensive resume. It's very impressive to say the least. I would say if you had one of these things on here, you'd probably be pretty happy, but he has quite an extensive list. So first off, he was a founder and actually brought the company to public, Driven Deliveries. Also, he created the first interstate B2B wholesale distribution company, Calyx, opened multiple different stores throughout the state. Now is also with EVO Labs and RipeMetrics. That's a lot. It looks like you did it all in about 10 years or so. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been a lot of work. I actually got into cannabis from commercial banking or corporate banking. I was a senior executive in banking at an early age, and unfortunately, my bank, like a lot of banks, about a third of banks in the U.S. actually essentially collapsed in the financial crisis, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do and was looking at some opportunities to start my own business. And I kept coming back to this idea of getting into cannabis. And and it was a difficult choice for me because I thought, I'm a senior executive at the bank in my early 30s. I don't want to be a drug dealer. But, maybe there's maybe I keep hearing that there's a legal way to do this. So I did some research, and effectively what I was looking at was, we were just coming off of the tech boom of the 2000s and the late 90s. And most of those people did pretty well, the ones that were successful. And I thought, if I'm right and cannabis does become the next emerging market opportunity, if I'm lucky and work hard, maybe, I can be well positioned in this industry. So I got in, I started a delivery because it seemed a little less risky at the time. If you had a store, you basically had a sign over your head that said, "Come arrest me here." Even if you were properly formed, you still had that, and you had a trail of people like ants walking in and out all the time. Where if you were a delivery, it was a little more clandestine, still properly formed, still properly operated under the laws of Prop 215 and SB 420. But it was just a little bit safer, and San Diego was a little bit more aggressive market than some other markets in terms of enforcement. And so, but from everything I can tell, we built the largest delivery in the U.S. within about a year and a half, and then, like you said, started opening stores. And fortunately, I'm fortunate to have had some successful exits. Unfortunately, some of those were for stock in companies that aren't doing well. But you live, and now I'm doing some consulting with Evio, as you noted, and I'm doing some work with a company called RipeMetrics, a tech company. And it's interesting because at this point now, I've had my own cultivation, I've had my own manufacturing, I've had my own distribution, I've had my own retail, brick and mortar, I've had my own retail delivery, and then I've done consulting for testing, and I've done work with marketing and technology companies. And I've touched pretty much every aspect of the cannabis industry. And I'm chair of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce Trade Association, which is a decent sized trade association. And so, I do have a relative understanding of the industry.
Yeah, it looks like you're very involved in the industry. So, I mean, I guess where did it, the point end where, okay, this is a viable business to a passion for the plant? Because it seems like you're very passionate about cannabis with how involved you are today. Where did that start? Yeah,
I know some stoners would get mad at me for this, but I would have to say I'm not as passionate about the plant, but what I am passionate about is people. And so, I got started in this in 2009, and what struck me early on was that it really did genuinely help people. Not everybody. Some people just want to get high, right? Let's be honest. But there were people with real medical issues. In fact, in that first company, which ended up being kind of a conglomerate of some stores and deliveries in different regions throughout the state, we used to have a list of patients that we offered 100% of their medicine to for free. If I would go and meet with them, kind of assess them. If we had an employee that said we should talk to this person, I'd have the manager vet it, and if it seemed good, then I'd go meet with the patient. And we had some people, and I heard some stories, and they tried kind of everything. Some of them got addicted to opioids, but nothing helped them like cannabis did. And interestingly, we had some cancer patients, some who survived and made it through, some unfortunately who didn't. But I've seen that it for some people, it's a genuinely good medicine that makes a difference. And, I think it's easy enough to have this passion for the plant, right? And for sure, you have to have a passion, I think, for wanting to see a good product in anything you do. But I think if you really want to be a good leader, and if you really want to do a good job in a company, if you really want to succeed, you've got to be somewhat passionate about what you're doing. And in most industries, and especially in ours, that's about the people. It's about humanizing people and seeing them for what they are, and understanding their customers, their archetypes, their demographics. They're all different, and we need to respect them and understand and try to speak to them. But my passion is more for the people, less for the plant. I've just seen the amazing results of the plant.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I mean, that's very similar to why I got involved in the business as well. But
really,
it is. Yeah. Same thing was more at first was more kind of the opportunity of, cannabis. But as I got more into it, I saw how it affected people and how much good it does. And there's for something that does so much good, there's a lot of things that are hindering people from knowing the truth. So that's kind of like where this kind of came out to be. But yeah, I mean, you're
well, and hopefully
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, hopefully we see in this new administration a more reasonable approach. Is just mind blowing and so sad to see Jeff Sessions and some other people from the current administration get up on stage and say, we have proof that there's no medical value to cannabis. Yeah. And you're like, it's not even kind of accurate. I mean, it's not even reasonably accurate. You're just lying because that's what you want to say. So hopefully we see something better in the next 4 years.
I think we will. But yeah, your resume. What's funny is that coming from the banking background, commercial lending. That's a pretty solid vertical, and you were doing well at the time. But cannabis is a vertical, but you're doing like everything in cannabis. I mean, you're doing distribution, you're doing retail, you're doing software, you're doing delivery service. There's so many different things that require so many different skill sets. Like, how did you make that happen?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a two-part question. So the first part being, I guess fundamentally, like, why would anybody do that? And so I started with delivery because delivery seemed a little bit safer, even though you could have brick and mortar and other functions under the law. It's kind of weird, and most people don't know this. We had back then you had what they called an affirmative defense. So the law never actually said you could sell cannabis. What the law said was that if you got arrested, you could defend yourself competently for selling cannabis. So it was really written backwards, and a lot of people still have a hard time understanding that. And so, what it leaves is the space where they can still arrest you for selling it because you don't have permission to sell cannabis. You just have a good legal defense if you get arrested. And so I did delivery for that reason because it seemed safe. And then we actually had some great success in delivery. And then we started opening stores, and we realized, stores is really, I think, the ideal place to be. In that process, we did some cultivation, some manufacturing to try to improve margins. And I've had multiple growers, and I will tell you, it did not go well. I'm not a good cultivator, okay manufacturer. And so that's how I tried those. Distribution, I'm blessed, I think, to have maybe a little bit of foresight or a little bit of ability for vision. And in 2013, I could see what I thought was the industry coming together. Starting to form into like an actual real industry. It was the first time that we started to see some level of acceptance. We started to see Washington, Colorado turn into recreational states. It's hard. I mean, it's a long time ago now, but and it was apparent that like, okay, this is gonna happen. In the beginning, I was hoping, and that's when I was like, oh, this is gonna happen. And I know that if you look at alcohol, you'd say the biggest companies in alcohol are pretty much the distributors. And so I said, we need to have distribution. And it was funny because at the time I would talk to brands, and I was the first one ever going to brands and saying, hey, let me be a distributor for you. I want to build a line of products and brands and take those to market. And pretty much everybody said, oh, so you want to be a vendor? And I'm like, no, a vendor is the guy that runs around with a bag full of weed and he sells it to retailers. I want to actually create a sales team and a sales force and have vehicles. And so anyhow, so that's what got me into distribution. Ended up building that and then selling that, and got a couple licensed stores. And then so kind of worked through that, started another delivery in the end of 2016, because that's when we started to see Uber Eats and Grubhub and these companies come up. And I was like, oh, you know what, delivery, because of new technology, delivery is becoming something new, right? If you went back to 2010, delivery is not what it is now. And so that's what led me back into delivery. And then as far as the technology and the marketing and the lab space, those were never really intended. In fact, I've had opportunities that I turned away, but there was groups that I knew that kept coming to me and saying, hey, look, can you help us with this? And I was like, you know what, I can help. And it seemed interesting. And then I got into it and I was like, oh, wow, I'm actually really making a meaningful change in these companies. And so that was the path and why. And it wasn't a plan. It just happened that way. It's just, we're in a very dynamic market and you've got to evolve. And I just kind of evolved with it. As far as like how you do it, you just roll up your sleeves and get it done. I think you have to have a certain amount of humility and patience to be able to do, I think, anything in any business, but especially in cannabis. You got to go in and say, even if I know everything today, a year from now, a lot of it's going to be changed, or at least that's the way it's been historically. And so I've gone into everything with open eyes and just a level of humility and really focused on, what can we do to find the problems and resolve them.
Gotcha. So it seems like it was just an evolution. And I think by your nature, you're a problem solver. It seems like you're seeing problems, you're seeing things could be better, and then you're just acting on it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I thank you. Thank you.
Well, 2009 was a while ago. Things have changed a lot since then. I mean, did you get some backlash when you switched from commercial banking to cannabis, when you actually made the leap?
That's an interesting question. I was actually I didn't tell anybody for a long time. I didn't tell my parents until probably 2015, 2016.
Oh, that's a long time.
I think well, my dad was the head of a crime lab and my uncle was a chief of police and my mom was big in politics. And so I told my mom, because it's your mom, right? So she's everybody's mom's typically a little more accepting. And so I told her, I don't think I told her until maybe 2015, 2014. And I told my dad when I got my license for my store, right when licenses started really becoming around, or permits, I should say, at the time. Because I was, buttoned up, and that's when I started telling my family. But, as far as the people in banking that I knew, some of the people I told early on, some of the people, to be fair, there's a reason I left banking. It is, it's got some stigmas and some stereotypes that are unfortunately accurate, about starchy old white men and it's relatively true. And I don't, there's some good people. I don't want to say anything negative about anybody, but it just wasn't where, I was the number 2 guy in lending. I was doing some portion of the chief credit officer's work, the number 1 guy in lending. And I was, I guess 34 when I left banking. I was very close and I think I had potential to move into a chief credit officer position. And I realized it just wasn't where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. No,
that makes total sense. Well, yeah, let's get into what you're doing now with RipeMetrics. So RipeMetrics is a marketing company, but what I found out that's a little different is that you guys are really taking the approach of the psychological aspect of it, the behavioral aspect of it. It looks like you're actually even working with a behavioral psychologist, correct?
Correct. Very accomplished behavioral psychologist.
Okay. So that being said, I guess without having to get into any of the proprietary information, but what type of behaviors are you kind of observing?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's, what we've done is really a little bit the opposite. So having the experience I had, I realized there was a real lacking in cannabis for smart marketing systems. Right now, mostly what you have is text messaging systems. And I would say they're lacking. They're very one-dimensional and flat. and they don't really serve a need. And bigger picture, most people don't know this, is the cell phone carriers actually strictly prohibit marketing cannabis through cell phones. And so Verizon, AT&T, all these companies that everybody's sending the messages through, and unfortunately these companies selling a service that they know is violating the rules.
Wow.
I'm like, that's a business model that isn't going to work, and you're still doing it. So I knew there needed to be something different. What I did is I sat down and just did a ton of research on what's the right way to do marketing. So this company was running, they had some real problems. I came in and said, let's reevaluate what we're doing. And I just did, that's where I started doing a ton of research on, okay, we're limited in what we can do in cannabis. So let's understand marketing fundamentally. And I just sat down and started reading a lot of white papers on the most advanced technologies, most advanced methodologies, what's working, what's not. To your point a minute ago, it's not just the world that's very different since 2009. The consumer marketplace is very different since 2009, right? Over the past 10 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in consumer demands and expectations. The way, I don't know you other than the 10 minutes we put on the phone, Jason, but I would almost guarantee that the way you shop now is fundamentally different than the way you used to shop. I'm guessing you use Amazon, you use other online services. Absolutely. You probably get some delivery here and there, maybe food. And so everything's evolved, and a lot of things aren't really catching up with that. So we looked at, okay, well, what's out there? Let's take this data and let's build a better marketing model. And then let's add behavioral science in. And really, if you distill it down in a simplified way, it's about personalization. So in the past, 20, 30 years ago, marketers didn't have an ability to really personalize marketing, right? What you do if you were smart is you'd bring in some focus groups, you do studies in different markets and try to understand who the people were. And then you try to have marketing that reaches that audience. You can, in the broader world now, you can have Facebook ads that are incredibly targeted specifically to people of your exact audience. We know the audience, it's cannabis consumers, right? They're coming in, they're making a purchase. Why not personalize responses that are very specific to them? So why not say, okay, I know that Kevin's going to come in and make a purchase. And if he comes in and makes a second purchase and third purchase, over time, he's going to have these behaviors. And over time, he's going to become a little bit more psychologically attached if he continues to make purchases. So how do we incentivize you to come back? How do we make you happy enough that makes you want to come back? And what things can we do? I can't change what they're doing in the store, but I can create messaging that engages with you after you leave. And I can automate it with good technology so that it's responsive to your purchases. So you leave, you go in, you make a purchase, our system integrates to the point of sale system and says, okay, well, Jason just had his first purchase. Let's send him a message that says, thank you. Thank you for coming in and making your first purchase. It's very personalized to you, not just with your name, but exactly where you're at in your customer journey. And we can map this whole thing out intelligently and say, okay, well, what are the best places to send you a message? When are the best times? And then let's use good data and say, what are the best coupons that we should use? What's the best way to build loyalty? So not just taking stuff that we would do from the past where you put up a billboard, but actually really using the most current data and then using psychology or behavioral science to look at what are the best times, what are the best responses to send to people based on behavior actions they're making. Let's map this out, and then let's build technology to automate this.
So really
Sorry, it's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah, but in a nutshell, I guess you're really not trying to focus too much on just getting like people through the door just with random marketing. It's more like improving the user experience, like the experience that they have with each individual company. Which seems like almost the exact opposite of how cannabis has been traditionally sold in the past, right? It's you're getting a lot of follow up, a lot of like, hey, you like this, maybe you like this type thing, I'm assuming. I guess. Well,
and let me give you some interesting. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's a little bit of a delay. I apologize.
Oh, go ahead.
But let me give you some interesting stats. So, you have a 5 to 20% chance or likelihood of capturing a new customer through good marketing. But you have a 60 to 70% chance of getting an existing customer to return. And it costs 5 to 15 times as much to acquire a new customer. So for the most part, everybody's focused on, I like to say that there's kind of two worlds of marketing. There's customer acquisition and there's customer retention. We focus on smart customer retention. There's way better margins in it. There's huge opportunity and there's not a lot of competition. And to your point, it's all about improving the customer experience.
I also noticed that you guys are managing like reputation management and reviews and things like that as well built into the system, which I guess in turn is a result of good customer experience, but can also attract new business as well. Correct?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. No. So we have some interesting pieces. So about 77% of consumers want to work with a retailer that requests some feedback or gets some feedback and then implements that. But nobody wants to fill out a 50-question email survey, right? But if we strategically hit you, let's say you go and you make a purchase, you try some product, and I hit you with the text message the next night about 7 p.m. and you're trying that product a little bit more. And I say, hey, we really appreciate you coming in, Jason. Thank you so much. How do you like it? Please answer 2 or 3 quick questions for us. And they're just rate 1 to 5 stars. And you just hit those really quick. And then we have a nice coupon tied to that. The likelihood of you responding to that is good. It improves the customer experience. And now we start to gather some really fantastic insights. So to do a win, one, we're engaging you. We're deepening the relationship, improving the customer experience, and we're showing you that we care by gathering some feedback. At the same time, we're taking that feedback and we're turning it into really actionable insights, which do things like, which you talked about. We also do things like help retailers understand what marketing is performing and what's not by asking certain questions here and there over time. So there's a lot of rich opportunity that's completely overlooked.
Now, I know it's going to depend on the company themselves, but just in general, I would say, what do you think people's, if they're using your service, what type of increase do you think you see in customer loyalty or reorders versus, if they didn't implement something like this?
Well, I'm going to be humble. RipeMetrics is pretty new. The company just started selling the product in December.
Oh, okay.
So we wouldn't have the data to speak to that yet, but what I can say is what the data is built on, the stats are fantastic. So the primary principle of what we do is that if you personalize messages in the way I'm talking about, you see about a 30% increase in marketing conversion. If you add context to that, contextualize it. So you go in, you make a purchase, and then that night or the next night, depending on what time you make the purchase and what time you leave, we would send you a message. And also depending, I guess, on what the survey is. Some surveys are just asking you about the experience. Some surveys are asking you about the product. And so if it's a product question, we want to give you a data try. But we would send you a survey either that night or the next night. So it's got context. It's not just something we shoot you a month later. And you're like, hey, and it's like, you've had 3 purchases, but we ask you about your first purchase, where there's no context. And so if you add context on top of personalization, you see about a 270% increase in marketing conversion. If you add that into a multi-channel strategy with text, email, and direct mail, which we do, and then we're going to add chatbot later and social channels, you see about a 650% increase in conversion. And so I can't speak to what our actual numbers are going to look like because we're not there yet, but I can tell you that the methodologies that we're employing are proven and demonstrated across many different marketing channels of different sectors, and they're fantastic.
Now that being said, because of technology, essentially could be used for any industry. Do you guys have any plans on going beyond the cannabis vertical, or are you going to stick with cannabis?
We're actually starting to get some requests to go outside the cannabis space. So it wasn't something we planned, but it's certainly something we're considering at this point.
Gotcha. So just for the listeners right now, just to let them know, who would be the perfect customer for you? Who do you think you can help the most? What type of business? Would it be a dispensary, a brand? What do you think?
Yeah. So we're starting with dispensaries. What we've realized is, hey, over the course of the customer relationship, we gather some really fantastic insights that are very valuable for brands and distributors. Because we're in an industry that's still, there's not a lot of transparency. It's difficult for brands to know, what's good about their product, what's not. Is it packaging? Is it the flavor? Is it the dosage? And we're getting that from these surveys. And so we think we can repackage that, or we know we can. We've got some brands that are interested already. Take that, anonymize the data, and then pass that on to brands as well in the future, probably like third quarter.
Okay. Well, if there's anybody that wants to get started with RipeMetrics, what's probably the best way?
Yeah, I would say go to the website, RipeMetrics.com, and check us out. There's a calendar on there, and you can set up a demo, and we'd love to talk to you.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Did you want to add anything about RipeMetrics? Do you want to touch on anything besides what we spoke about?
The only thing I would say is that, we're in a world where 90% of people are annoyed by mass text messages, but that's what almost all the cannabis solutions do. I don't know if you're a cannabis consumer yourself. I'm guessing it sounds like you've probably been some places that offer that or that used to offer that. And it's not a very intelligent approach. And so we would, just suggest to your viewers, whether it's us or somebody else, be smart about what you're looking at. Be smart about what you're doing. There's better technology solutions. Find one.
Well, thank you for your time. I just want to ask one last question. Since you're so involved in the cannabis space, what do you see? And this is tech and cannabis. So tech-wise, what do you foresee in the future for technology in this vertical?
Oh, that's a good question. I think our industry's horribly immature when it comes to technology. Mm-hmm. The POS systems are trying to figure out who they want to be when they grow up, and not at a slight to them, but more of like, okay, what does a cannabis POS system do in the next 5 years? What does the regulatory environment look like, and what are the requirements on them for that? What kind of features should they offer cannabis retailers and brands and distributors? And so I think there's a lot of growth still. I think that when you look at the entrants in the industry, we haven't had a lot of entrants because of the stigma and because there's plenty of money to be made in tech outside of cannabis. You don't have to take on the risk of cannabis. You can go start a tech company and be wildly rich, wildly successful without having to take on any of the risks of cannabis. But I think that it's inevitable. I think with the new administration, we're likely to see some significant shifts in the regulations in the next year or two. And I think we're going to continue to see, if you went back 3 or 4 years, which isn't very long when you think about it, and you ask people what they thought of cannabis versus if you ask them today, you get a very different picture. There's a tremendous softening in the stigma and in the politics around cannabis. And I think the next 2 to 3 years is going to be another dramatic shift in that same direction. And I think when we see the federal regulation soften, we're going to see a lot of companies, not just in technology, but outside of technology, that say, this is a good industry for us to get into because it's a growth industry. There's huge economic upside here, huge opportunity. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for a lot of these big, well-developed companies to really get into it because they don't want to be associated with some of those problems now when they know they can, and I don't know that maybe this isn't a good example, but for, just as a talking point, maybe Salesforce says, and I know they're doing some stuff in cannabis, but maybe they say, let's wait another 2 years. We're Salesforce. What do we have to lose? It's not going to affect their, okay, so we pick up a couple hundred extra clients. Like, is it, in the broader scheme of things, it's nothing for us. So let's wait until the stigma's soft and we don't have any risk. But that's going to change, and there'll be big competitors and big entrants. And that's, to be honest with you, that's what we're banking on. We're planning on building and preparing for that time, and then hopefully finding a suitable opportunity to exit.
Absolutely. I think there's big things in store in the next few years. I think there's going to be big things in store for your company as well. So I want to.
It's very kind.
Thank you again for coming on this show. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank Chris Boudreau for coming on to the show. And for all your cannabis news and to find other podcasts like this one, visit us at www.trichomes.com. And if you want to reach out to the show, email us at techandcannabis@trichomes.com. I'm Jason Kitamura, and thank you for joining us.